All this is Dr. Mubin Sayed. So today's discussion is very interesting. However, let me remind you, we are in this container or we are on this platform YouTube, which also has its ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine policy. So I'm going to start from there. One request that I'll make is that you continue to think about how did these rules and regulations and terms and conditions come about? How did this happen? So let's see. I'm going to share my screen. We're going to talk about FDA, but with certain evidence. So here is COVID-19 medical misinformation policy of Google and YouTube. So here they're saying YouTube doesn't allow content about COVID-19 that poses a serious risk of egregious harm. YouTube doesn't allow content that spreads medical misinformation that contradicts local health authorities or the World Health Organization. Now, in these terms, I mean, of course, when YouTube legal department was putting those terms together, they had something in their mind, and I'm sure, as they're saying, local health authorities, that would be at least for US, FDA and CDC and WHO. So they'll be considering what they're saying. So my suspicion is that whatever CDC and FDA said, that was kind of one of the drivers for these policies. And what are these policies? For example, they say treatment misinformation will not be allowed. What is that? Content that recommends use of ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine for the treatment of COVID-19. It is interesting that you would see in today's FDA, the discussion from FDA lawyer in the court, where she was eager to actually show 3 cases where FDA allowed, I want to use her own word, not mine, but my impression, allowed the use of ivermectin for COVID-19. That's what she specifically said. But here, according to this terms, that should have been an incorrect thing, although these terms are originating or sourcing from there. Then they say claims that hydroxychloroquine is ineffective, categorical claims that ivermectin is an effective treatment for COVID-19, claims that ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine are safe to use in the prevention of COVID-19, etc. The point is, number one, this particular talk, I have to stay within YouTube's terms and conditions to say this is not a talk about ivermectin treating COVID-19. This is a talk about FDA in the court discussing their statements about ivermectin and saying, we really didn't say what, we didn't really command the doctors or others, or we did not give medical advice. So that's the interesting part. So let's see that. So this is YouTube. I want to give you some more evidence. Here is a letter from FDA. Now, again, let's keep it in context. We have been always been more balanced and less sensational. So let's keep it in context. Here is FDA. The context is going to be FDA says we never commanded anyone to not use ivermectin for COVID as an off-label prescription. That's their basic essence. And the judges were talking with them in the context of this case, and I'll discuss the case in a second. The judges were saying that, no, you did say somewhere over here that stop it. And FDA said, well, even if you said that, that is the only part that would be illegal, but the rest is fine. So how are they fine in their messaging? Here is how they're fine. This is the letter to President and Chief Executive Officer, Federation of State Medical Boards, Humayun J. Chaudhary. And to him, I had discussed this letter when it was sent out, December 13, 2021, where they're talking with them saying, recently FDA has received complaints about compounding pharmacies selling drugs, products containing ivermectin, claiming that they can treat or prevent COVID-19. Then they go on and say currently available data does not show that ivermectin is safe and effective. Then they continue and they say ivermectin causes skin rashes and nausea and vomiting and blah. Then they say using ivermectin products in preventing or treating COVID-19 may pose risk. We are also sending this letter to National Association of Board of Pharmacy to facilitate communication among associations with shared goals regarding these matters. So they can actually, FDA can say that here, there is nothing that we said don't use it. We were just warning that, hey, this could be dangerous. And it was very interesting in that court hearing, one of the judge asked that how many other products you do this for. And the FDA's counsel said, well, we do it for the opioid drugs as well. So ivermectin somehow rose to the level of opioid drugs in FDA's mind during the pandemic. So this is one letter. I want to show you some more interesting evidence. There is a letter here which was sent by the insurance company. And dear doctor and or healthcare provider, ivermectin should not be prescribed for COVID-19 or any use of this indication should immediately cease for our members. So this is Blue Cross sending these letters. Of course, FDA would say, we have nothing to do with this. It's Blue Cross's policy. Go ask them. We have nothing to... I'm putting words in their mouth, but I'm sure that that is the kind of position they'll take. Now, what are others doing? They're saying the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, FDA, the American Medical Association, and the American Pharmacists Association have strongly warned against prescribing ivermectin. The manufacturer of ivermectin says it is also not useful, and so on. Then if you see here, they threatened the doctors to say, currently insufficient data exists there, prescribing authorization. So the iMedic and PPI Medic have identified potential fraud, waste and abuse patterns. So as soon as you tell a doctor that you are committing fraud, which I believe, I'm not a lawyer, which I believe is a criminal offense. Do you think that the doctor would be saying, oh, well, you're just trolling me. There is no legal basis for this. I can just keep on doing. The doctor will become a little hesitant or quite hesitant. So they said to the doctor, this is a letter that a doctor kind of shared, that iMedic and PPI Medic have identified potential fraud, waste, and abuse patterns, prescribing authorization of ivermectin to beneficiaries in states where they are not medically licensed, prescribing, authorizing quantities or blah. And then they also say here, next steps. This was interesting. We will continue to monitor your prescribing behavior and may request to review patient charts. A determination that you have inappropriately prescribed ivermectin could result in several consequences, including referral to our fraud and abuse department and or termination of your participation in our network, an action that would be reportable to National Practitioners Data Bank. How did this all happen if the agency, for example, let's say FDA, you would read today, FDA said that these statements that we made, these were quippy statements. These are witty statements. We were making jokes. We were poking fun with people to say, hey, don't do it. And they said, we are government. We are allowed to talk with the citizens. And we were just talking with them. So here is their quippy statement. You are not a horse. You're not a cow. Seriously, y'all, stop it. Now, I would actually strongly recommend that I have this link in the description, this video's link, that you listen to this. And if you didn't want to spend the whole 49 minutes, then start near 17 minutes and watch a bunch of it. It is really interesting to hear. Now, a little about this this case. This is, I believe, it is Dr. Let me read it from here. This is Dr. Robert L. Apter, Telly Bowden, MD, and Dr. Paul Marek, who has been here as well many times. So I'll go there in a second. And that is against FDA. And how did FDA discuss this? I want to show you some of those discussions. Some of those I would request that you watch this video. Some of those I'm going to present to you, and some I'm going to just read from Chief Nerd, who is a person on Twitter who has also done some transcription of it. So let's look at these interesting times. So FDA on Ivermectin. At 17:41 minutes, Ashley Honnold for the United States. So she's the one who's representing FDA. She says, this case is about informational statements. Information. So FDA maintains that these are informational statements. These are not legally binding statements. These are not commands to anyone. Because the problem is FDA cannot give commands. They cannot practice medicine. The authority to practice medicine is a doctor's authority. And this also tells you, this is just an ivermectin discussion. Think about it. Wasn't there enough practicing medicine when everyone in the country was saying, go get vaccine, even to the point where I heard a CNN anchor saying that those who do not get vaccine, let's leave them behind? Wasn't that practice? So back here, FDA says this case is about informational statements made by the US and Food and Drug Administration to inform consumers. I copied pasted some of the transcript from YouTube, so these spelling mistakes or spaces are copy paste issues. Drug Administration to inform consumers about the dangers of using certain drugs. FDA made these statements in response to multiple reports of consumers being hospitalized after self-medicating with ivermectin intended for horses, which is available for purchase over the counter without the need for a prescription. So I wanted to make sure that we put this context in front of us, that FDA took multiple positions. One of those positions were, we were making this statement for horse paste. The judges asked them that, can you make that statement even for the horse paste? Can you do this medical advice or informational advice? And it turns out that FDA is actually not even empowered to do that. But let's read on. So then at 1806, they continue and they say, FDA did not purport to require anyone to do anything or to prohibit anyone from doing. So they reached this far, the counsel, and the judge cut them and said, what about when it said, no, stop it? Why isn't that a command? These seems to me, it's that if you were in English class, they would say that was a command, stop it. That is different than we are providing helpful information. So the judge is saying that, hey, you say stop it. Stop it. If you are in an English class, you would understand that the words stop it will mean stop it. That is not, we are providing helpful information. To which then the FDA counsel said, Your Honor, the language that FDA used in these tweets were merely quips. And I don't think that these clips change the substance of FDA's statements as plaintiffs. And they were going to continue and that sometimes folks make these statements that they should not, and when you catch them on them, they simply say, well, I was just joking. So here they're saying, well, we were just joking. These are just quippy statements. We're just being witty. Judge, is that a command? Stop it. So Alexa, stop. So the judge said, is that a command? You said, stop it. Honnold, the tweets about the horse. The tweets about the horse ivermectin were intended to advise consumers that they should not use ivermectin intended for animals and that this could be unsafe. Judge, I'm sorry. Can you answer the question, please? Is that a command? Stop it. Honored, Your Honor, in some context, those words would be construed as a command, but in this context, where FDA was simply using these words in the context of a quippy tweet meant to share its informational article, we were just joking. They were joking, and YouTube took them seriously. YouTube actually took down 60 of my videos, gave me a permanent strike. There was a company that did really horrible things to me for talking about ivermectin. And when we lawyered up and we had those discussions, they had me sign a letter that I would never discuss this with anyone. So that is just me. There are more who were getting punished in a more rigorous way, if that could be said. So Honor says, Your Honor, in some contexts, these words could be construed as a command. But in this context where FDA was simply using these words in the context of a quippy tweet meant to share its informational article, there is a pandemic going on. We were trying to poke jokes. Those statements do not rise to the level of a command. Plaintiffs can see that it was proper for FDA to identify what ivermectin is, FDA authorized for its FDA approval for certain conditions like skin conditions or parasites, and it's not FDA approved for treating COVID. So then at 2102, judge says, what did it do about ivermectin that before issuing these types of informational warnings? So judges were actually very reasonable with FDA to try to figure out why FDA was doing it. So FDA said that, hey, based on science, I'm paraphrasing FDA. And once again, the best way, if you go to this video from the US Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, and over here, if you go down to these three ones and say show transcript, then on the left side with time markers, you will see transcripts. Or you can just turn on transcription and watch this. Some of the recording is very low in volume, so transcript may be very interesting. So these are transcripts. So this says, so when FDA said that, hey, we do these informational statements based on science, judge said, what did it do, FDA, about ivermectin that before issuing these type of informational warnings? Does the FDA have any authority? So another judge said, does the FDA have any authority, any legal authority to regulate off-label uses of prescription drugs? Which is what this would be. What gives them, the FDA, what gives them that authority? FDA says, Your Honor, FDA has multiple overlapping sources of authority that I'm happy to walk through that gives FDA, through what gives FDA authority to convey information to the public. So again, these spelling and word mistakes are YouTube's transcript. So my apologies. I didn't have enough time to fix them. So through what gives FDA authority to convey information to the public. But here, now check this out. FDA was not regulating the off-label use of drugs. This is at 2202. FDA was not regulating the off-label use of drugs. These statements are not regulations. That they have no legal consequences. They don't prohibit doctors from prescribing ivermectin to treat COVID or for any other purpose. Quite to the contrary. This is still FDA counsel saying, quite to the contrary, there are three instances I'd like to point the court too in the record that show that FDA explicitly recognizes that doctors do have the authority to prescribe ivermectin to treat COVID. So when I read this, of course, I mean, let's give them a fair listening. What they're saying is, we never said stop it. Although they did say stop it. For that stop it, they said, well, that could be illegal, sure, but the rest is all fine. They said, we never said stop it. We never commanded anyone. We just said it is very dangerous. And here they're saying, we didn't say don't use it off label. We actually are going to point you to 3 instances where we show that FDA explicitly recognizes that doctors do have the authority to prescribe ivermectin to treat COVID. So then the question becomes, this case is where the doctors are saying, hey, these guys tried to stop ivermectin usage and that got us in trouble. They are simply saying, well, I think that this is my understanding of their intent here. What they're intending to do is to say, we never said don't prescribe it. And if some doctor was punished for prescribing it, then that should be between them and their hospital. We have nothing to do with this. So when I reached this far, I felt that FDA was doing this. They were saying, we didn't do it. But that is my feeling. FDA may have been doing a better thing than this. So now I want to share a couple of more things. Number one, these oral arguments, this link is present in the description as well. You can go in here and you can go to MP3. That would open up this page and you can hear this. Now, some more evidence. This is why you should not use ivermectin to treat or prevent COVID-19. This is FDA. Why you should not use ivermectin. And they have, once again, that horse over here, and they have this over here. Then, this is American Medical Association. What the FDA wants doctors to tell patients asking for ivermectin. Then this is American Medical Association. Why ivermectin should not be used to prevent or treat COVID-19. And now I want to just share a few more quotations from the same video. And I would actually request you to watch the video by yourself. There are certain things that you would say, yeah, FDA is kind of correct over here. And then there are certain things that would make you upset that, no, they're not doing the right thing. So check this out. Now I'm reading for Chief Nerd. He's already done this homework. So thanks to Chief Nerd for this. Check this out. FDA attorney Ashley Chong Arnold now says doctors did have the right to prescribe ivermectin. Here they're saying here FDA was not regulating. I just read it to you and with timestamp. FDA was not regulating the off-label use of drugs. The FDA explicitly recognizes that doctors do have the authority to prescribe ivermectin to treat COVID. And this is where they also say that we would actually show you 3 examples. Then they say, FDA attorney Arnold said, the FDA has sovereign immunity. And I heard it, and that is what kind of is interesting for me. FDA has sovereign immunity and cannot be held responsible for misleading statements. And it was very interesting to hear that the judges were saying that, and again, I'm paraphrasing, it's not verbatim. They were saying to the effect that if you made if you did misinformation or misled, or if your advice was incorrect and led to death, and they said, we're not saying that this is the case where it did, but we are asking, or could you give dating advice or just the drugs advice? To which FDA said, FDA is merely making informational statements. They do have sovereign immunity. Then they said, FDA attorney says that FDA does have the power to issue medical advice. Judge says, does it matter whether they are scientific views or not, or whether they are just views? Arnold says there are nothing in the multiple sources of authority that I've cited that requires the FDA to go through any sort of formal process. And her position was that we are government and we are talking with the people. And we nowhere are we stopped from talking with the people. So this was just a talk. So there's nothing in the multiple sources of authority that I cited that require the FDA to go through any sort of formal process. FDA attorney says even if FDA statements on ivermectin were partially misleading, where they said stop it, the agency is not responsible for doctors losing their job. They said even if this court concluded that the parts of the statements that said stop it were unlawful, the remaining parts of the statements that merely provide information would still be available. That that was very funny for me. For meaning, imagine if somebody says to another person that go and do this, go and steal money from this place, and they take this statement and say, well, this guy said go steal the money from this place, and the guy says, you know what, if you just remove the word steal, the rest is all fine, so we should just remove the word steal. Yeah, sure. So that is what it felt like to me. So then they say, in the most disturbing admission, FDA Attorney Ashley Chong Arnold said that FDA is held accountable by the political process. That was interesting for me. And I heard it, and this is the statement she made. The public can elect its government officials, and FDA have politically accountable heads. The reason she said this was that the judges said that FDA is not an elected authority to make these kind of statements or decisions, to which she said the public can elect its government officials and FDA have politically accountable heads. So our heads are political of the agency who are held accountable by political process, meaning they are accountable to their political influences. It's not the role of the courts to fact check the FDA's scientific statements. So, really interesting talk over here. Start from somewhere about 17 and watch it. It's 20, 30 minutes. Maybe it's a good weekend listening. And what I'll do is, I wanted to get this to you. And then if you like, what I can do is I can take small questions and answers and make 1 or 2 minute clips for interesting ones to check. Correct. So Paul says Congress can eliminate or defund FDA. Congress can, not us. When we voted for a president, these are the folks we get. And that is what she was meaning to say, that our heads are political. So yeah, they're going to participate in political influence. So for me, what was interesting was that during the pandemic, anyone who said ivermectin or used ivermectin, even yesterday you heard from Dr. Phillips that if he prescribes ivermectin, and he does it for many other reasons because he's a chronic inflammation doctor, sometimes pharmacist just stops it. And he has to call the pharmacist and explain that, hey man, this is fine, let it go. Or provide whatever reason he has to provide to the satisfaction of the pharmacist so that the dog. So here, FDA is saying, yes, we are not authorized to stop a doctor from off-label use of ivermectin, even for COVID-19. So even FDA doesn't have that power. Only doctor has that authority. But FDA, in my opinion, enabled so many people around the doctors to kind of cage the doctors in a structure where they couldn't do much, which included people losing their jobs, which included people not being able to prescribe, which included people getting insurance letters to say, we are watching you, you fraudulent little doctor, and which included American board saying to the doctors that, hey, don't do it, and this can be malpractice. And so this whole machinery worked, while the influencing machinery simply said, we didn't say that. So I think it would be a very interesting weekend listening. And I just have one question for you. Would you like me to go over this and question answers, create small 4 or 5 minutes videos to discuss what happened, or good enough for you and you can then watch the actual video? The link is in the description. In the description, there are more links as well. If you would like to get access to Drbeen.com, there is a link for that. If you would like to support this work, there are links for that as well. So Skyfrog says, where did it go? Here. So can BCBS be sued because they threatened the doctors? I would think so, because FDA is not putting their hand on them to say we back them up. And how about the pharmacists? I mean, I have great respect for all healthcare professionals. May they be pharmacists or nurses or NPs or PAs or microbiologists or technicians. We all work together to offer service. So it's not that there is anything wrong with pharmacists, but enabling pharmacists. Remember American board, American Medical Association plus Pharmacy Board, they joined hand. They even gave a combined combined press release where they said that we will work together to make sure doctors don't offer ivermectin. And do you remember for hydroxychloroquine that American Medical Association was challenged to say, because they said don't give hydroxychloroquine, and they were challenged to say that you should not come in between a doctor and their off-label usage of whatever drugs they want to which American Medical Association had said that in principle this is the correct standing and we have this standing, but in this case we will not adhere to our own standing and we would not allow hydroxychloroquine. I actually talked about all of those things. I have 60 videos that are down because YouTube didn't like them, because they had the words ivermectin in them. Some were just the mechanisms. They had nothing to do with COVID. They were still being down, and they are down. So this is a situation, thanks to the doctors who sued them. At least we'll find out more. And then there was one of this, that there is no scientific evidence. So that really, think about it. If FDA is really just adhering to the principle of, if we see a complaint of somebody becoming sick with a medicine and we started tweeting about it, then there have been complaints about vaccines on the spot causing allergic reactions or causing other issues. I didn't see any quippy tweets from FDA about that. So, of course, there is a bias in there, but I just wanted to make sure that you can see this. And for another little evidence, as I showed you YouTube's terms, I will not monetize this video, because then YouTube would say that you were talking about ivermectin, although I'm talking about FDA statements, but you are talking about ivermectin, and that caused a ad to run, and that company didn't like their ad to run next to ivermectin. So you did a bad job and we are upset with you. So anyways, this is just how the life has been. And we'll go from there. So what do you think? Does this make sense? I'm sure that for many people, this makes sense. Yeah, FDA didn't say anything. They were just saying, hey, it is dangerous. And for some, it will be that, hey, they were really crossing a line. We'll see what judges say. That is where eventually the outcome will be. Skyfrog says, now I'm worried about food too. The F in FDA. What lies do they tell us? So, for example, food, talking about food, microplastics. There is a latest study that shows that microplastics, which are present in many of our packaged foods, microplastics actually enable SARS-CoV-2 spike proteins binding to ACE2 because of whatever electromagnetic or conformational changes that they enable. So yeah, there can be many such things as well. But I'm sure they're not going to send out a tweet saying, hey, you're not a horse or a cow. So, so this is the discussion. Please like, subscribe, and share. I hope that the video stays up and I hope that the channel stays up. We'll see. If it disappears, then I'll figure out some other place. In the meantime, if you would like to support this, there are links in the description. There is no compulsion for it. And if you would like to get access to Dr. Bean, please do that as well. Have a nice weekend. I would see you next week. Bye for now. Skyfrog says, but horses eat oats. No more oats for me. Correct. Horses get antibiotics as well. We should have stopped that too. So we shall find out. In the meantime, I am not putting any ads on this one. So you should just support this video and we'll go from there. The links are in the description. Bye for now.